There are places beneath your feet where the dead have been waiting for thousands of years. Not resting peacefully, waiting. And when archaeologists finally dig down far enough to reach them, what they find isn't just old bones and ancient artifacts. It's evidence of rituals so disturbing, practices so brutal, and secrets so dark that researchers have nightmares for years afterward. In 2003, archaeologists excavating beneath a Roman bath in London found something that made them stop digging. 200 skeletons, buried in shallow graves. But these weren't normal burials. The bodies were thrown in carelessly, many showing signs of violent death, and several were decapitated. This wasn't a cemetery. It was a killing ground. And it had been hidden beneath a busy modern street for 2,000 years. In 2013, researchers exploring the catacombs beneath Paris discovered a chamber that wasn't on any map. Inside were the bones of over 6 million people stacked floor to ceiling in elaborate patterns, femurs creating walls, skulls arranged in decorative designs. But in the back of this chamber, they found something that didn't belong with the others. Fresh scratch marks on the walls. Claw marks. Human claw marks. Someone had been sealed in there alive, trying desperately to escape. In 2019, archaeologists in Mexico found a tunnel beneath the Pyramid of the Sun. At the end of that tunnel was a chamber containing over 50,000 objects: jade, obsidian, animal bones, and human remains. But the human remains weren't buried respectfully. They were dismembered, burned, and arranged in patterns that suggested ritual sacrifice. And the tunnel had been intentionally sealed with tons of rock, as if whoever built it wanted to make absolutely certain that whatever was down there never got out. But here's what should terrify you about these discoveries. These aren't isolated incidents. Archaeologists find disturbing things underground constantly, and the deeper they dig, the worse it gets. Because ancient civilizations didn't just bury their dead underground, they buried their secrets, their victims, their darkest rituals. And now we're digging them all up. This is the creepiest stuff archaeologists have discovered underground, why each discovery reveals something genuinely horrifying about human history, and why some of these excavation sites had to be sealed back up because what they found was too disturbing to leave exposed. 1. The Screaming Mummy of Egypt, a man buried alive in agony. Let me tell you about one of the most disturbing artifacts in the Cairo Museum. It's called the Screaming Mummy, and when you see it, you'll understand why. In 1886, archaeologists unwrapped a mummy that had been found years earlier, but left sealed because something about it felt wrong. When they finally opened it, they found a man frozen in absolute agony. His mouth was wide open in a scream. His hands were bound. His face was contorted in terror, and he'd been wrapped in sheepskin, which was considered ritually unclean in ancient Egypt. This wasn't a normal burial. This was a punishment. But here's what makes it genuinely horrifying. Modern forensic analysis revealed that this man was buried alive. His facial expression isn't post-mortem muscle contraction. It's the face of someone who died screaming. The binding of his hands and the sheepskin wrapping suggest he was being punished for a serious crime, possibly treason or patricide. Ancient Egyptians would seal criminals alive in tombs as the ultimate punishment. Imagine being this guy. You're dragged into a tomb. They wrap you in unclean material to curse your afterlife. Then they seal the tomb and walk away, and you're left in total darkness, buried alive, knowing no one is coming back. Your final moments are spent screaming in terror, and that scream gets preserved in your mummified face for 3,000 years. The museum keeps this mummy on display. You can go see it right now in Cairo. Look at the face of a man who spent his last moments in unspeakable terror. That's what's actually under the ground. Not peaceful burials, but evidence of humanity's capacity for cruelty. 2. The Bone Church of Sedlec, 40,000 skeletons turned into decorations in the Czech Republic. There's a church that looks normal from the outside. You realize every surface is covered in human bones, And I don't mean a few bones tastefully displayed. I mean 40,000 complete skeletons arranged into chandeliers, coat of arms, and architectural features. Here's how this happened. In the 13th century, an abbot brought soil from Jerusalem to Sedlec and spread it over the cemetery. Suddenly, everyone in Europe wanted to be buried there because the dirt was holy. People were buried in this cemetery. Then plague hit. Then wars. The cemetery ran out of space. So in 1870, they hired a woodcarver named František Rint to organize the bones. And this guy looked at 40,000 skeletons and thought, I'm going to make art. He created a chandelier containing every bone in the human body. He arranged skulls into the Schwarzenberg coat of arms. He made garlands of vertebrae. The entire church is a monument built from the dead. But here's what makes it creepy beyond the obvious. These aren't anonymous bones. These were people. Each skull in that chandelier belonged to someone who lived, loved, had hopes and dreams. And now they're hanging from a ceiling as decoration. Some of the skulls show signs of violent death, sword cuts, blunt, force trauma. Those people died violently in medieval wars. And now they're part of a tourist attraction. The church is still active. People hold services there, surrounded by 40,000 dead bodies fashioned into interior design. And tourists take selfies with the bone chandelier. That's what's underground in Sedlec, and it's not even hidden anymore. They turned it into a feature. 3. The Capuchin Catacombs of Palermo. 8,000 corpses just hanging around. Not buried. Not in coffins. Just hanging on walls or lying in open crypts. Dressed in their best clothes, preserved for centuries. Starting in the 16th century, Capuchin monks discovered that their catacombs naturally mummified bodies due to the dry conditions, so wealthy Sicilians started paying to have their dead relatives preserved and displayed in the catacombs. For 300 years, bodies accumulated. Monks, priests, professionals, children, all mummified and arranged by social status in different corridors. But here's where it gets genuinely disturbing. These aren't ancient mummies. Some date to the early 1900s. There's a little girl named Rosalia Lombardo who died in 1920, just over 100 years ago. She was embalmed so perfectly that she looks like she's sleeping, except she's been dead for a century. Her body is in a glass coffin, and if you look closely, her eyes appear to open and close throughout the day as moisture evaporates and condenses. People have filmed this. It looks like she's still alive down there. Walk through these catacombs, and you're surrounded by death in every direction. Mummies standing upright against walls, bodies lying in open coffins, skeletal faces staring at you through eye sockets that once held living eyes. Some bodies are remarkably preserved. You can see facial features, clothing, even hair. Others have decayed into skeletal forms that seem to reach toward you. And this is still happening. The catacombs were officially closed to new burials in 1880. But the last burial was Rosalia in 1920. And the bodies are still there, on display, deteriorating slowly in front of tourists who pay to walk through corridors of the dead. That's what's under Palermo, thousands of corpses just hanging out, literally, for anyone to visit. 4. The Paris Catacombs, 6 million bodies in decorative patterns. Beneath the streets of Paris lies the world's largest grave. The Paris Catacombs contain the remains of over 6 million people stacked in tunnels that stretch for 200 miles underground. But these aren't respectful burials. These are bones stacked like firewood, arranged in patterns and left in darkness beneath one of the world's most beautiful cities. Here's why this exists. In the 18th century, Paris cemeteries were overflowing. Bodies were stacked in mass graves so full that the smell was unbearable, and bodies were literally breaking through cemetery walls into people's basements. The solution: empty the cemeteries and move all the bones into abandoned limestone quarries beneath the city. For decades, workers carried millions of skeletons into these tunnels and stacked them, femurs creating walls with skulls arranged in decorative patterns. entire sections organized by cemetery of origin. It's systematic, it's organized, and it's absolutely massive. But here's what makes the catacombs genuinely terrifying. The mapped sections are tourist attractions, but 90% of the catacombs are unmapped, illegal to enter, and patrolled by police specifically to keep people out. Why? Because people who've explored the illegal sections report finding things that aren't on any map, chambers with evidence of recent activity, rooms set up like living spaces. In 2004, police found a fully equipped movie theater in the illegal catacombs, seats, projection equipment, films, even a bar stocked with alcohol. Someone had been using the catacombs as a private cinema, surrounded by millions of dead bodies. When police returned 3 days later with specialists, everything was gone. Someone removed all the equipment and left a note. Do not try to find us. People get lost down there and die. The tunnels are maze-like. There's no cell service. If you get lost in the illegal sections, you're wandering in darkness, surrounded by millions of skeletons with no way to call for help. Bodies of lost explorers are occasionally found years later. That's what's under Paris. Not a romantic city of lights. A city built on top of 6 million dead bodies arranged in decorative patterns in tunnels that go places we don't talk about. 5. The Nazca Underground Aqueducts. And what else is down there? The Nazca lines in Peru are famous, massive geoglyphs carved into the desert that are only visible from the air. But beneath those lines is something less famous and significantly creepier, a network of underground aqueducts called puquios. And when archaeologists explored them, they found more than just ancient plumbing. The puquios are spiral stone structures that descend underground to access water tables. They're engineering marvels built over 1,500 years ago. But in several puquios, archaeologists found human remains, not buried respectfully, thrown in, and many of them show signs of ritual sacrifice, blunt force trauma to the head, ceremonial positioning of bodies, evidence of being alive when they went in. But here's the disturbing part. The Nazca people practiced ritual sacrifice extensively, particularly of children. Archaeological evidence suggests they would sacrifice children to water gods during droughts. The puquios, structures built to access water, were where some of these sacrifices occurred. Children would be killed and thrown into the water tunnels as offerings. In 2019, researchers exploring one puquio found something that made them seal the entrance. At the bottom of the spiral, beneath the water table, they found a chamber that shouldn't exist. Inside were bones, lots of bones, and evidence that this chamber had been used repeatedly over centuries. The researchers took samples and sealed the entrance. They haven't published full details about what they found down there, which tells you it was bad enough that they don't want people looking for it. The puquios are still functional. Some are still bringing water to surface communities 1,500 years after they were built, which means people are using water that flows past the remains of sacrificial victims from centuries ago. That's what's under the Nazca Desert, not just mysterious lines but underground chambers where children were killed to make it rain. 6. Derinkuyu Underground City, where 20,000 people hid from something in Turkey. There's a city that exists entirely underground. Derinkuyu goes down 18 stories beneath the surface and could house 20,000 people along with their livestock and food supplies. It has ventilation shafts, wells, wine cellars, schools, chapels, and even a massive stone door that could only be opened from the inside. This wasn't a tomb or a storage facility. This was a place where entire populations could hide for months. The city was rediscovered in 1963 when a man renovating his basement broke through a wall and found a tunnel. That tunnel led to another, and another. Eventually, they mapped an underground complex spanning 200 feet deep with multiple levels connected by narrow passages. But here's what's genuinely unsettling. We don't know who built it or exactly why. Carbon dating suggests it's at least 2,000 years old, possibly older. The prevailing theory is that early Christians built it to hide from Roman persecution. But that doesn't explain some of the features, like the massive stone doors that roll closed and can only be opened from inside, or the narrow defensive passages designed to force invaders into single-file lines where defenders could pick them off one by one. What were they hiding from that required an 18-story underground fortress for 20,000 people? And why did they need defenses that assume attackers would follow them underground? What kind of threat requires you to take your entire civilization and live beneath the earth for extended periods? And here's the creepiest detail. Derinkuyu isn't the only one. There are dozens of these underground cities in Cappadocia. They're connected by tunnels that stretch for miles. Entire populations could move underground through these tunnel networks. This wasn't one community hiding from one threat. This was a regional defensive network, suggesting that whatever they feared was persistent and widespread. You can tour Derinkuyu now, walk through tunnels where 20,000 people lived in darkness, hiding from something they feared more than spending months underground. And we still don't know what that something was. Why this matters more than you think. You're walking around every day on ground that's filled with this stuff. Underground parking garages, subway systems, building foundations. We dig into the earth constantly. And sometimes we find things we wish we hadn't. Construction workers in London found a plague pit containing 3,000 skeletons stacked in mass graves. They were building a new train station. They stopped construction, excavated the bodies, and then kept building. Those bodies are now in storage somewhere while trains run through the space where they were buried for 600 years. In 2018, workers excavating for a new building in Rome found a complete ancient Roman house. Sounds cool, right? Except the house contained evidence of a violent massacre, multiple bodies with sword wounds, signs of fire, and indications that the house was intentionally destroyed and buried. They documented it, reburied it, and finished the building. That massacre site is now underneath an office building. This is happening all the time. We build on top of the past without thinking about what's down there. And most of what's down there isn't peaceful. Ancient civilizations did horrible things: human sacrifice, mass executions, ritual murders, plague burials, and practices we still don't fully understand. All of that is still underground, waiting to be found. The creepiest part isn't what archaeologists have discovered. It's what they haven't discovered yet. Because every time we dig, we find evidence that humans have been doing disturbing things for thousands of years. And there's way more underground than we've uncovered. So the next time you're walking down a city street, remember, beneath your feet are layers of history. And some of those layers contain things that gave archaeologists nightmares. Things that were buried intentionally because our ancestors wanted them hidden. Things that are still down there in the dark, waiting for someone to dig deep enough to find them. The ground beneath you isn't empty. It's full of secrets that have been waiting centuries to be discovered. And trust me, based on what we've found so far, there are some secrets that probably should have stayed buried.